Welcome back to another episode of Delta Waterfowl's The Voice of the Duck Hunter podcast. Today I'm joined by First Lite's Director of Brand, Ford Van Fossan, to discuss his unique job in the hunting industry, as well as the development and launch of First Lite's waterfowl camo pattern called Typha that took place earlier this year. With that introduction, let's bring in today's guest. Ford, welcome to the Delta Waterfowl podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, and we're sitting here at Delta's podcast booth at the Duck Hunters Expo in Little Rock, Arkansas. How's your experience been so far?
Great. Y'all pulled it off as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Everybody's here. People are flooding in. It's exciting, and that's no small task to just start up a show.
So Ford, Director of Brand, what does that mean?
Sort of. It's dangerously all-encompassing. Anything can be folded under the word brand, but generally it's I'm overseeing kind of outbound messaging to the customers via social media, via email, via web imagery, content creation, kind of all that falls loosely under my purview. And then the coolest part, and I suppose the reason I'm here, is that our conservation efforts, our nonprofit partners, and our projects on the ground all fall under my purview too.
No, that's great. You had mentioned that. So at one point in your, I know Ryan Callahan, he was Director of Conservation.
Yeah.
You had conservation tagged onto your title at one point.
Yeah, I've kind of had it all.
Yeah.
I was First Lite's first intern.
Okay.
2014, I walked into the office, introduced myself, and a couple months later had wrangled an internship from Scott and Kenton, and at that point it was one room with 6 guys kind of making ASAP base layers, and our base layers printed in ASAP camo, and it was a very different organization than it is today. But I've kind of done it all: customer service, dealer service, pro programs, content creation, web management, and that's sort of all come together into this brand role, which pulls in a bit of everything for sure. But again, the conservation part's sort of kind of my favorite, sort of my baby. Because that's always been what's important to me. I was actually on a wildlife biology track, studied conservation biology in college, worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service right out of school, and then the University of Delaware doing some whitetail trapping before I came to First Lite. So that's actually sort of my roots that way.
No, that's impressive. You said one thing that, see if we can capture lightning in a bottle twice. And you said that conservation director, some form of conservation is often attached to your title, but you dropped it because?
Yeah, that's, I do, sometimes people throw director of brand and conservation on my title, and I kind of stay away from that, A, because it's confusing and longer, but B, because brand for us encompasses conservation. It's always been a part of our heritage and our business model, frankly, and I'd like to say that it's, to this day, a core pillar of who First Lite is as a company and why we're here.
Yeah.
Bring it all back around.
Yeah. So, why call it out if it's a part of your everyday life, right?
Yep, exactly. It is just a core part of our brand. And honestly, I often tell people, only half jokingly, it's not really altruistic, right? If our customer and our employees don't have access to wildlife and wild places, we don't have a business. We never will. So protecting those places and supporting conservation and conservation groups is part of our success. We have to do it.
Yeah, I think that's the tough thing is, I've talked with others, and that at the very core, the apparel or camouflage, business, it's a business.
Sure.
Someone is trying to make money.
Absolutely.
But there's that balance. I love it when companies don't stop right there. We're making money. It's great. Just reaching across the aisle, going the extra mile, recognizing that, there are conservation activities that are taking place that allow those, the deer, the ducks, the turkeys to be hunted, to be harvested. So I just love to see companies give back, and you guys do it, as good, if not better than anyone.
Yeah. I mean, and sportsmen have always obviously been champions of conservation, and I think that's too been an inspiration for us and how we do it. For example, this Camo for Conservation program, we've just expanded to Delta, with our Typha pattern, with our new waterfowl pattern. A small portion of every single sale of any object printed in Typha is supporting Delta's work. So mimicking sort of that Pittman-Roberts model, right? Every sale supports conservation because every sale is dependent, again, on our ability to access the great outdoors, and we got to protect that.
Well, we appreciate that, absolutely. In my role, I lead our team of biologists that are putting the duck production programs on the ground, the research on the ground, hunter recruitment programs on the ground, and again, just can't thank you enough for supporting Delta, supporting conservation, and it's exciting. I'm looking forward to the future.
Yeah, I would be lying if I said I wasn't. I was pretty pleased to have that official apparel title for First Lite now.
Yeah,
it was definitely a sort of a long-term dream of ours.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. Yeah, I mean, we call ourselves the Duck Hunters organization. We try to live it, and pursue that goal every day.
Yeah.
Hey, we skipped this over. It is kind of a tradition of mine anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's a company is about its people first,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
And it's not just the product. So I'd love to just get to know a little bit more about you personally.
Yeah.
And then, you did kind of cover how you got to First Lite, but I would love to hear, your upbringing.
Yeah. To take the story a bit further back, I grew up on Maryland's Eastern Shore, a town called Trapp, just south of Easton, home of the famous Waterfowl Festival. And so waterfowling, it's such a strong part of that place. You really can't separate the two. And it was neat. We actually did a short film as part of a series leading up to the launch of our waterfowl line, and we filmed it back in Maryland on Chesapeake this year. Did some goose hunting and some duck hunting, and it was cool to see home through some different eyes, through the eyes of the videographers that we had brought along, who Minnesota, no background, and they're like, man, all the streets have duck names, and there's a big statue of geese in the center of town, and this, that, and the other. And it's like, man, it's true. It's a ducky place, and I was really lucky to grow up there. It's a really, really cool place. I was just telling a fella, I had this college girlfriend. She's like, she came to visit back in the day, and she's like, why does everybody has carvings of ducks in their homes? What's up with that? And I never thought that was unusual at all, but it is, and it is standard in that part of Maryland. Everybody has decoys. Even if you don't duck hunt, you have decoys in your home. It's just what you do. It's just like, why do you have paintings on your wall? Why do you have decoys on the shelf? It's a really special place. So growing up there was a huge part of, I think, shaping, who I've become, obviously as a human all the way around, but especially when it comes to the outdoors, and especially when it comes to hunting, it really impacted me.
Okay. Have you always been a hunter then?
Oh yeah. Yep. My dad put a shotgun in my hand. I want to say maybe 9. I think you could take your hunter ed at 9 in Maryland at the time. I don't even know if that's still the case.
I don't know.
But shooting a 410, a single shot 410, pretty much as soon as I could do it. I mean, again, it's just cultural there. If you grow up in Aspen, Colorado, you're skiing. If you grow up in Santa Clara, California, you're surfing. If you grow up in the Eastern Shore, you're goose hunting. Even if you're not a goose hunter, even if you do it once a year, it's just what you do. It's the culture, which is awesome. I'm so fortunate to be from there.
So you grew up in a hunting family. What did you like to hunt the most?
So geese, I would say was sort of what we did. That we had a corn and soybean farm and winter wheat, as a cover crop in the wintertime, and that was really what was good on our farm. And really our part of the Eastern Shore in general is, I would say, mostly known for goose hunting. Less so ducks and geese. If we got real lucky and it got real cold at the end of the season, canvasbacks and blackheads, as we call them, bluebills, I think as the rest of the world calls them, they would come up farther up the creeks and we might get a crack at them. But a lot of Canada goose hunting, and then a lot of dove hunting, and obviously whitetails too were a part of that mix. But the focus was definitely geese.
That's cool. Hey, we at Delta, we have a team of policy staffers that they deal on big picture, farm bill, agriculture, conservation initiatives, but they also deal with national and local hunting issues. And I tell you, we are overwhelmed at times with phone calls from duck hunters saying, a lot of them on the Eastern Shore. There's a discharge ordinance. Somebody's trying to close hunting on this bay that we've been hunting, for 3 generations. Have you seen? You said you're going back to Maryland on Monday. Have you seen changes or heard of them?
To the bay as a general rule?
Just in your lifetime.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So when I was coming up, there was no goose season. there was what was called the moratorium. That
Okay.
really has a lot of weight, sort of like he who must not be named on the Eastern Shore.
Sure.
But that, fortunately, was lifted, if I recall, the year I got my hunter safety card. So I think it was either the year or the next year, but basically, more or less at the same time, that goose season opened back up to 1 goose, ultimately got to 2 geese. But now, as you might know, in the last couple of years, has gone back to 1 goose. And so, yeah, there's certainly been changes in my lifetime. And, obviously the Chesapeake's not exactly a picture of health either from an ecological perspective, unfortunately, as a general rule.
No, and so now you've flipped to kind of the other side of the country.
Very much so.
In Idaho, right?
Yep, Idaho. Very different, obviously. Mm-hmm. Great big game hunting, great upland bird hunting, and also great duck hunting. That surprised me. I wasn't really aware of the vitality of the Pacific Flyway, but it's a great place to kill ducks.
Yeah, I've only heard good things about hunting in Idaho from a waterfowl perspective. I've not done it myself, but I've heard great things. But it's not widespread. Is that true?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, so we're in the southern half of the state, a lot of which is high desert or mountains. Neither of which, as a general rule, hold a ton of ducks. But where there's water in Idaho, there's ducks, which is cool. So the Snake River is obviously a principal, factor in that. But even closer to us, we have sort of spring creeks that stay open through the cold winter that hold ducks locally. And it's always a trip to me being from the east. A spot near and dear to me that I hunt quite a bit. Throw a decoy out and a 25-inch brown trout shoots out from under it. It's just a cool deal to have this sort of tradition of both fishing and waterfowling intertwined in these same special places.
Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting. One of the things you said, I don't think we were recording yet, but you were saying how, waterfowling was a big part of your upbringing.
Absolutely.
And then, your time at First Lite, there wasn't a waterfowl line.
No. But this is going to sound like such a sales pitch, but it really is true. I mean, we were all hunting in it. We'd come out with a whitetail jacket we were wearing in the marsh. It was really a pursuit that kind of bound everybody, and if anything, I almost feel like there was more, that circle, those overlapping circles. Waterfowling was kind of the most common pursuit in the office for so long, and we had so many passionate waterfowl hunters that it was sort of a matter of time before that, on one side, that experience and passion that our employees have was meshed with our technical expertise making hunting gear. And that's how the waterfowl line was born. I think it was kind of always gonna happen.
Yeah.
I think it was just a matter of time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine there's a certain leap that a company takes when you open up a whole nother line like that.
For sure.
What went into, and then you have your own Typha camouflage?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Typha, so named after the genus that encompasses a lot of the waterfowl. A lot of the wetland plants that we pursue waterfowl sort of among, right?
Yeah.
And I must say that was a name I came up with.
Okay.
But it was like 1 of 10, and we took it to the patent office and ran through them, and they were getting shot down, here, left and right for various legalese reasons, and I was like, oh, I guess we're going with mine.
Those are the things. Yeah. A few things at Delta, we've tried to trademark them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you have a phrase that you want to turn into a trademark, but it's just gets kicked out because it's too common of language. Like that.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was something, like I said, we ran into. So pleasantly surprised they went with my suggestion. But yeah, Typha is the new pattern for open situations, as we describe it. So marsh, field, agricultural situations, anything that's kind of grassier, right? Quote unquote.
Yeah, I love it. Where I live, it's everything is faded. It's the cattails, it's the stubble fields, cornfields, and so I think that has a great application. But I love it because it is brighter. I mean, there are shadows in it too. Don't get me wrong.
And that was a real emphasis. I'll tell you, we really wanted to address the issue of sort of blobbing out, which it's funny to say that in sort of a technical way, but a lot of camos do look great 3 feet away when you grab it on the rack. when you put it 50 feet away, all of a sudden it starts getting darker and darker, and by the time you're 100 yards away, it kind of looks like a brown blob.
Yeah.
And I think it's not intuitive because, again, when you see it close, when you see it on your buddy, when you see it on the guy sitting next to you in the blind, you're like, oh, it looks great. Looks like the marsh. But again, not so good as you get further away from the distance that those ducks or geese are perceiving it. So keeping that light, keeping that from blobbing up was really a driving factor in the evolution of Typha, for sure.
How many years in development?
2.5, I believe, is the term. It kind of depends on when you define the inception of the pattern.
Yeah.
And I want to say it's version 11.6 or something.
Yeah.
It's something pretty crazy in terms of how many tweaks were made, and some of those were small, some of those were big, but you just can't. And this sounds like such a sales pitch too, but you can't design it in the lab. You can't design it on the computer. You've got to get it out there. You got to get it out there on a shady day, or on a cloudy day in the shade. You got to get it out there on a sunny day. You got to put it in a marsh. You got to put it in a cornfield, and all of that gets factored in. And we fight little lighter, little darker, little lighter, little greener, little yellower. Back and forth. And eventually we came out with what we got today, which we're pretty pleased with.
I understand that the product testing can take years.
Oh yeah.
Sending, I guess, versions of the actual apparel out into field testers to give you feedback.
Hitting every flyaway too was an important part. So Maryland was I think the furthest east we got, and then all the way over to just short of the coast along the Columbia, in Oregon, and kind of everywhere in between. Just again trying to find problems, right? That's what it's about. You're trying to figure out the situation you didn't think of ahead of time, in which in this case a pattern or a garment or whatever fails, breaks. I think we have this tendency, all of us in the outdoor industry probably, we put out these cool videos with rock music, look how cool this garment is, but that's just not how this product gets developed.
No, I suppose not.
It's when your arm gets cold because the gasket was wrong or the pocket's in the wrong place, and you went to put your cell phone and dumped it in the water, and this, that, and the other, and that sort of less glorious part of it is key. It's what makes it good in the end, getting it out there.
Yeah, I was talking with Sean yesterday. Some of the products that are now being printed in Typha are the same item that you're going to get in any of the big game patterns.
And we pride ourselves on the versatility of our gear. We hope to really not have to sell you 7 different base layers.
Right.
One that can do it all is sort of the dream. Now, obviously, we're going to print those base layers in Typha, but it's the same base layer I'd recommend for elk hunting. It's the same base layer I'd recommend for whitetail hunting, within reason. There's different contexts, but the base layer system's really the same, and even some of the lighter, what we call transitional outerwear is the same. Packability, for example, is of the utmost important on an elk hunt, but being able to get a puffy jacket as an extra layer in a blind bag can be awesome also. So you will see a lot of our current gear also printed in Typha, along with, of course, a brand new set of styles explicitly for waterfowl hunting.
So what are some of the waterfowl specific items? Probably a lot of the outerwear?
Yeah, I'd say the flagship pieces are outerwear based. On one hand, we've got the landing zone jacket, which I've been talking a lot, I would say, more to with folks down here where it's not getting quite as cold. So a shell jacket is probably getting towards more what they're needing. So that's just a 4.5 layer waterproof jacket that's real burly, but doesn't have any insulation again. So layer under it, layer it down, flexibility being an emphasis that way. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have the Refuge Collection, which is our insulated line, bibs, parka, muff, etc., for the coldest conditions. And anything, if anything, man, we made that stuff too warm. I remember testing those bibs out, I think 2 winters ago, and it was 2 degrees. I was putting out Canada shells in Idaho, and I got too hot in the bibs. I was venting them. So if anything, like I said, we went too warm with some of the gear, but I'd rather it be too warm than people get cold, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Layering, I'm thinking back in my lifetime, it feels like a relatively new thing.
Yeah.
But but it's what I've always done.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, I mean, I had crappy boots. I had coats that didn't fit me because I was a kid. You know, my dad had 3 kids that hunted, but you know, as an adult, where you can start buying items that you can wear for years until they wear out. I mean, layering is, I don't know, that is probably the most important thing, if you ask me, when it gets into the field. Is you go in with your warmest gear, you're going to sweat, and it's going to be the difficult rest of the day for you when it gets cold.
Absolutely. And luckily, that is our heritage. I mean, the First Lite was founded essentially when Scott and Kenton printed a merino wool garment with camouflage. That was sort of their aha. Yeah. That's our history. And so layering, base layers, and merino wool specifically really is our heritage, and still what a lot of people know us for. And, you know, very conveniently, as we go into waterfowl, merino is a hell of a base layer for a duck hunter, right? It retains tons of its heat when when wet. So if you dunk, you're not necessarily going home. It's obviously very warm. It doesn't stink up, which, you know, as I would say, it's less of a critical element than it is to a whitetailer, but it's still pretty nice to put on a base layer in the morning and not immediately smell yourself.
Yeah, most all of the big game hunting I do is backcountry big game hunting, and as you know, you do that as well. Is, you know, some of the articulation in the clothing, the base layers, the ability to shove that outer shell in the back there. That's how I really got into the layering, and there was a time there where I thought, that's not necessary for duck hunting, but not all duck hunting is the same.
No.
You know, some of it's a boat trip, you know, out to a point, throwing out decoys. Some of it's loading, you know, decoys over your shoulder and hiking a mile out into a field that's too muddy. And so the layering system does work for all types of hunting.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know, as you referenced a little earlier, the driving principles for the development of our waterfowl line, I would say, were durability and waterproofing, right? Those are the kind of the primary needs. But there's certainly a reason we made some of our popular puffy Western hunting items we printed in our Typha pattern also, because again, you're walking in, it's lovely to stuff that synthetic puffy in just a little chunk of your blind bag and be able to pull that out after you've walked in.
So you guys have some hard goods, I'll call them, that you're working on too? I was heading that direction. My favorite thing might be our ground control pack. Okay.
So kind of our very first bag we've made, and it's awesome. Sort of a tub design, floats, can be used standing up or sort of sitting down in sort of a traditional blind bag format. Removable dividers on the inside for gear storage. Roll top dry bag in the center of it. I mean, it's just dialed, and it's dialed whether you're, you know, using it as a true blind bag, throw it in the boat, or walking it out to a pit, or as sort of I tend to do more, walking into a deeper public land spot as sort of a true pack, if that makes sense.
You have it in the booth?
Oh yeah.
I gotta go check it out.
Yeah, I'll have to give you the tour. As you can tell, I'm excited about it. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, you know, I saw it on the radio, so you saw it on the podcast. I can actually see it. Ford is definitely glowing over some of these things.
It's like I said, I think it's my favorite piece. It's pretty neat. Logan did a really good job putting that thing together.
Yeah, I do want to kind of switch gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
The conservation ethos of First Lite, the company, the people, you know, like many, I follow First Lite on social media. And I really smile from ear to ear when I see some of the conservation projects that your staff participate in. Just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm particularly proud of that. You know, we kind of divide our efforts up into 3 silos. And, you know, the most sort of conventional is what we call, you know, fundraising or generating dollars, which is critical, right? And programs like Camo for Conservation with Delta fall into that category, where we're raising money so y'all can get the work done, which is awesome, and I think will always be the core of it, whether that's our roundup program so folks can donate checkout, or whether that's as simple as, you know, giving away a jacket at a banquet so that more money gets raised. That's an important element of our efforts for sure. On top of that, we've got advocacy, which I think is just as important, and that's putting out the word that you need to call your senator about Recovering America's Wildlife Act, right? Telling people what that bill is, telling people when that's hitting the floor, telling them that they need to make their voice heard. And I think that will always be a critical element, you know. Maybe the most important, depending on your view of democracy, so to speak. But
it's a big country, stating the obvious.
Yeah.
There's, we're talking about waterfowl right now, but there's big game, there's upland, there's everything. How do you guys, as a company, what's your approach to staying abreast of those issues?
I think, frankly, I hit the Instagrams often of Delta, Pheasants Forever, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, National Deer Association, BH, whoever. I'm just kind of trying to stay abroad there. Yeah. And our social media manager also, to kind of keep our eyes on the pulse and trying to pick the right moments to tell folks to do something, right? I mean, you know that better than us, but really trying to say, okay, now is the time to contact your senator about the Grassland Act. It's on the floor, or it's approaching the floor. And again, I think as a profile, as a sort of entity in the outdoor space, that's critical. That's on us to try and get the word out when things need to get done. And sometimes too, take a stand on stuff, which is hard to do as a company, because you often get that, well, y'all should just make clothes. It's like, well, again, if y'all don't have somewhere to duck hunt, we're not going to have anybody to sell clothes to.
That's true.
And so again, advocacy, I'm getting into the weeds, but advocacy is another silo of our conservation efforts. But what you're alluding to, and I think maybe my favorite part, is our on the ground stuff. And that really comes from a desire to just sort of do something. Sending money directions is great and critical, but it's nice to get your hands dirty every once in a while. And that's really where Brush for Bucks, which is our in-house project, came from. So we had participated in a bunch of, back up. In southern Idaho, we've got an issue whereby rangeland, and specifically winter range, gets devoured by fire and then subsequent invasion by annual grasses like cheatgrass, medusa head, etc. And so we lose those critical warm south slopes where mule deer, elk, and antelope winter. Basically, we lose the forage. They forage on bitterbrush, they forage on sagebrush, and that stuff gets replaced by these horrible invasives, basically. So we had been on a couple plantings whereby we'd volunteered to help the state put sagebrush in the ground to try and jumpstart those shrub communities and put food back on the ground for big game and other species. And at a certain point after one or two of those, I was like, we could do this. We don't really need the state necessarily. And so we worked with a contact there, and they helped us kind of organize on buying seedlings and loaned us some dibble bars and planting bags. And we started purchasing 1,200 seedlings in the fall and the spring. We'd shut down the office, and we'd have the whole crew go out and put those seedlings in the ground on local winter range that had been affected by this fire invasion cycle. So, a small project in the scheme of things, but helping get our employees more directly involved and helping put just a little bit more habitat on the ground for local big game. And that program's, I think we started in 2018.
Okay.
And what's cool is we actually recently partnered with some of our influencers, the guys from Get Hushin'.
Okay.
And we broadened it to sort of customers. So we put out a call, got 50 people to actually buy tickets, quote unquote, that would help pay for seedlings.
Really?
And did sort of a hybrid employee Hushin' and outside customers project, and we were actually able to put 10,000 seedlings in the ground.
Nice.
This spring, and we're looking to grow that program wider in the future.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I wasn't being rude, but I was looking at how many Instagram followers does First Lite have? 345,000. So
yeah,
it's a keep it up.
It's a voice.
Yeah,
it's a voice, and we have to use it to get the word out again when it comes to important issues, when it comes to important legislation or ethics or whatever it may be. I think it is one of our greatest, one of the ways we can contribute the most.
Well, it does. It makes me feel really good. And if there's anything, Ford, that Delta can do, to help flag issues, partner on advocacy or anything like that, conservation projects, sign us up, sign me up. Like I said, it's a great. You guys are great ambassadors. That's 345,000 people that, probably hunt really hard, but are now, consciously or subconsciously, being infected with that conservation ethic, and that's what we need.
Oh yeah, well, and you know far better than us how wonky policy can be, and so if we can help, I hate to say it, but boil that down a little bit and get the word out to people about important legislation. The Great American Outdoors Act came to mind recently in terms of something I think in some small way we help get the word about, help get some calls, letters, emails to senators, and maybe in our own small way help get that over the line.
Where they say many hands make light work.
Yeah,
something like that.
I don't know where I read it recently, but this really stuck with me because I have all of our, I have our 2 senators and our 2 congressmen's contact in my phone.
Oh, cool.
I try to call them just regularly on, conservation issues as they come up. And somebody told me, I don't know if it was at a TRCP meeting or where I heard this, but that in a state like Idaho, a smallish state, very small state, 10 phone calls will get their attention. 10 phone calls on an issue will get a legislator to sort of pause and think. And so, getting 10 employees in First Lite to call a legislator is not that hard.
No.
It's not that much in the way of voice to make a difference.
Talk about what's a typical employee at First Lite like? Who are they?
It's gotten more complicated as we've grown so much. But the typical employee is obviously going to be a hunter, probably a fisherman.
Okay. Yeah.
They're probably going to do a little bit of everything. They're probably going to dabble in waterfowl, big game, and whitetail. Where their emphasis is probably going to depend on where they came from.
Sure.
It's heavy Midwestern, which might surprise people. I think we're probably more than half Midwestern.
Really? Okay.
Yep. Obviously a lot from the West itself, a lot from Idaho, Oregon, Washington, the states, Montana, right around where we're at.
Sure.
But yeah, very Midwestern. And so obviously, those guys tend to be more whitetail oriented.
Yeah.
The Westerners tend to be more elk and deer oriented, and then waterfowl kind of cuts across everybody.
That is interesting that you say that. I do feel like I kind of look at my childhood, and I was lucky. We'd wake up, go duck hunting, and then where I lived, we'd rough grouse hunt in the middle of the day, and then we'd jump on our tree stands at night. But one of the things that I can't help but think of with waterfowl hunting is, there's, when I was, and maybe you too, when you were when you were pursuing a wildlife degree,
mm-hmm.
They taught about the 5 stages of a hunter.
Oh yeah.
So there's the one who just doesn't have any skills. They can't shoot anything. They're just terrible. And you would start advancing through skills, and you enter this volume stage where it's all about how many of something can I harvest. And then you start to refine methods and start to challenge yourself. I hope I never reach the last stage. The last stage is maybe more that you prefer a camera over a gun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm ever going to reach that one, although I like that part of it too, but I hope I never get there. But what I think happens, so I'm just going to go father-son.
Yeah.
Take the dad. Dad is at a more advanced stage of a hunter, and after a stressful day of work, all they want to do is sit in their tree stand.
Yep.
Or sit on a hillside.
Yep.
And just relax. Right?
Take it in.
And so big game tends to be something that people more advanced in their stage tends to gravitate towards. But
mm-hmm.
the kid, they're at, I want volume, action, excitement.
Yep.
And so I think some people kind of get, I think it's a bit of a conundrum in the sense that the kid wants to go duck hunting.
Oh yeah.
Maybe more than big game hunting.
Yep.
And so I think it's important to do both. And I do find waterfowling can be something that everybody can do.
Yep.
And so it's interesting, though, that you say that that's the kind of what everybody has in common.
Yeah.
More than elk hunting, more than something else.
I think just obviously, there are waterways everywhere, right? There aren't necessarily elk and mule deer everywhere or whitetail everywhere, but there's ducks in South Carolina and there's ducks in Washington State and there's ducks in Utah. And, I think in that regard, it does cut across the country that way. There's not too many places where there aren't waterfowl of some sort somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, this has been a great conversation, Ford. I don't know if I've spoken with you on the phone in the past. I'm one of those people that'll call looking for advice from time to time.
Yeah.
But it's been a great conversation. I'm very proud to be partnered with First Lite. The Camo for Conservation, obviously, it's a great funding mechanism for the programs that we do on behalf of waterfowl hunters. But I'm also proud to call you guys the official apparel company of the organization.
Yeah. Well, we can't be more pleased about it. It's been awesome. And I'd finish on the advocacy note. Do reach out to us if you've got something you're looking to push, because we certainly can't change the world, but we can do a little. And people, I appreciate when NGOs reach out to us trying to push stuff all the time. I was just talking to Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters a day or two ago about some kind of action alerts they were working on, and Pheasants Forever about the Grasslands Act in the works right now. So definitely reach out if you got something to push.
I'll do that. I'm really glad that you brought that back up and flagged it. That means it's genuine.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, thanks, Ford. Appreciate the time. We'll just kind of wrap up here. If anybody has any questions, of course, you can call First Lite, email First Lite, jump on their website, learn about the great work that they do. Look at the Typha pattern. Those items obviously are only sold through the store.
Correct.
But there are a few items in partnership with Tangle Free that...
Oh yeah, yep. I won't go into the full spiel, but basically their cord assortment will be available in Typha now, which is awesome. They make great stuff, and we've been pleased as punch to partner with them as we make this entrance into the waterfowl world. Okay.
So the apparel, like the other apparel, is just available at firstlite.com.
Correct. Yep.
But some of the hard goods that we've talked about, blinds, tangle-free bags, things like that.
All of the tangle-free items will be available on both our site and tangle-free site.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Ford. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
Oh yeah. We'll get back to it. This is fun.
Sounds great. All right. Take care.